And if you believe that, Prof, if you believe that we're meeting the objective that we agreed on.
Yes, okay. Not a problem.
All right. So, starting now. Before we do that, Mr. Producer, are you setting this morning, afternoon, or good day for viewers?
Good afternoon. Is good.
Okay, all right. So starting now. Good afternoon to our viewers everywhere. Today we're delighted to have distinguished Professor Wilburn Prasad.
Cut.
The
All right. I need to do this. I need to mute myself.
Oh, okay.
Get out of the screen, and I want to tape a few seconds before you start. Okay.
Are you Professor Emerita?
No. I am not. I was never made a professor.
Oh,
People call me prof, but I don't know.
I just want to go Dr. William Prasad. Well, we'll call you Professor.
Huh?
We'll call you Professor. Too bad. Everybody knows you as Professor. That's in my little research at UWI. For people, my little research, it says Prof, yeah, man, and teach me.
Yes, okay. Well, then not professor. You would say prof.
Yes, prof, right.
So that's what lots of people call me prof.
Yes.
But the fact is, I left the university system as a senior lecturer, as a tenured senior lecturer. I was head of the Department of Economics. And indeed, were things a little different in the world, I would have been made a professor, but we can't go into all of those things.
Okay,
but the fact is, I was not
so we're
elevated to the rank of professorship.
Known as prof.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And your last name is Prasad?
Prasad, yes. Okay. And it's Wilburn Prasad.
Mm-hmm. Wilburn. Okay, good.
I'm born in Guyana.
Yes.
Citizen of Guyana, naturalized citizen of Jamaica and the USA, and view myself as an international citizen, especially in this COVID-19 and climate change, which people deny because they make money from doing that, etc., etc. We're destroying the whole planet.
Yeah. All right. So, Mr. Small, when you're ready. Oh, where did I put my note again? The title of the book is Jamaica Economy.
Jamaica Post-Colonial Struggles for Dignity, Equity, and Development. And Winston, you are sure that this lighting works?
What do you think, Anne-Marie?
I'm good.
No, how do I look? I mean,
I think you need more light.
I do.
It went from.
That's it.
No, one half of you is illuminated, and the other half isn't. From my view.
The left side a little bit lighter, but.
Jamaica.
How about this? How about this?
Yeah, I'm ready. Look at that.
Yes, I can.
This is better?
I can see the whites of your eye.
So this is better?
Yes. There is a little sheen on your right
That's
here.
what I was talking about. This when the light gets more, the sheen gets.
Yeah, there's a little sheen right there.
Okay, I'm ready. You can go.
Let me see.
That's it, Prof. Put in a little.
I'm gonna mute myself now. So.
That makes a difference.
Yes.
Some of the sheen gone.
Yes. Huh? What is that? You need to tell me that. You need to give me that.
This is just powder and.
Baby powder. Okay.
I was telling Winston earlier that when I used to go on JBC, and I go in there, and then this woman just run out of the control room and bring a thing and say, "Your forehead shining," and just do that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I should do that when I'm going out. Yes. All right.
So is it okay now?
It is perfect. Absolutely.
Because shortly after this, now I'm going to start to sweat, even though the AC is on, and it'll happen again, you know?
Perfect. Well, the focus is really not supposed to be on me. It's really supposed to be on you. So, right. So, are we ready?
I am ready.
I'm going to mute myself so you can go anytime now.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This afternoon, we are joined by Dr. William Prasad.
No, error. Wilburn Prasad, Mr. Wilburn Prasad.
Oh, sorry.
Don't put any title, just Wilburn Prasad, but
Okay.
just Wilburn Prasad, author of whatever.
All right, so good evening. This afternoon, we're joined by William Prasad.
Well, Wilburn. Can't do that. My father's name was William.
All right, I know William. All right.
Hold on.
Yes.
Because I need to restart this one because make sure I'm taping it on my live stream.
Okay.
Want to make sure. We stop a few times. Event unknown.
Wilburn. Okay, I got it.
Wilburn is a name made up by my mother and father because my father liked the name Wilberforce, the anti-slavery guy, and my mother said, you must be mad. So they make up this name.
Well, it is quite.
So you're not going to forget it once I give you that background.
Wilburn.
Wilburn, W-I-L-B-E-R-N-E, like the city in Switzerland. What's happening, man?
Go ahead.
Good evening. We're joined this evening by Wilburn Prasad, tenured lecturer of the University of the West Indies, distinguished author, Guyanese by birth, Jamaican at heart, committed Caribbean persona, and a citizen of the world, as described by Dr. Prasad. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in for a treat because we're going to be talking about his latest publication, a book which is fascinating and interesting and entertaining. Dr. Prasad, welcome.
Thank you.
So before we talk a little bit about the book, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. Well, you said quite a lot. Born in Guyana, but lived most of my life in Jamaica, now domiciled in the USA. By profession, you would say I'm an economist, of the political economist. And for most of my life, I taught at the University of the West Indies, did research there, published material, was concerned about what was the issue of economic development in what used to be called the underdeveloped countries. That's not a nice name, so that was changed to developing countries. I'm not sure that these countries are developing. Indeed, some of them may be underdeveloping as a continuity. So the thing is that economics has a lot to teach everybody, but because of some factors, there is a tendency in economics to move to something more, quote unquote, permanent or more scientific, the use of mathematics in economics. It has gone to a stage where people can advance their careers rapidly by simply promulgating stuff where a range of assumptions are made, mathematical techniques are used, and with the amazing power of the computer, we can replicate ranges of studies. Now, the thing is, economics has a lot to teach us, to guide us. Take, for instance, we use international trade theory. we can make assumptions that we only have two countries and we only have two commodities, and we build models. We get a lot of insights from those models. But to apply some of this to the real world without taking into account the assumptions that had to be made in order to develop those robust results is problematic. And sometimes we fail to do that. What else you need to know about me? I'm concerned about where we're going. Currently, this coronavirus matter, COVID-19, is something which we should have been prepared for in a way that is much better, would have enabled us to respond more rapidly. That's sad, but hopefully we can learn from our mistakes. Issues of climate change, environmental decay, rapidly growing inequality across the planet. These are things which have tremendous negative consequences for people, and we need to pay some more attention to those things. I don't know what else to tell you.
You have given us a mouthful. Now let us turn our attention to this book. It has a very intriguing title, and I want you to tell us what is the title of the book and why did you name it?
Okay, the title of the book is Jamaica, Post-Colonial Struggles for Dignity, Equity, and Development. Selected columns, Wilburn Prasad, 1976 to 2013. The latter part is principally a description. These columns were written by Wilburn Prasad. And what we have chosen of the hundreds of columns are those that range from the period 1976 to 2013. That's it. The title. Jamaica, as all the territories of what then became known as the Commonwealth Caribbean, but which were the jewels in the British crown of the West Indies, they were all colonies of Britain. And that is where New World plantation slavery flourished initially. People do not really know that those small little territories, Barbados, Jamaica, etc., in the Caribbean, were much more profitable in the generation of wealth for the British Empire than the North American colonies. So the epithet to be as rich as a Jamaican or as rich as a West Indian in London was something well known. Another thing that people don't realize is that plantations were factories in the field before industrialization in Britain. There was industrialization in those plantations. Sugar, the sugar cane, required rapid treatment in the industrial plant because the juice would begin to ferment if left unprocessed. The boiler, the guy who stopped the boiling when the mix was going to be crystallizing to sugar, his was a critical activity. So there were all kinds of riots, rebellions, etc. Slavery, an awful thing. And all of this was meant to benefit the colonial power. There was no dignity in work. Now, we have to jump. We come to the period 1834. You have rebellions, you have the abolition of the slave trade, you have the abolition of slavery itself, but all of these relationships continue. We come a long, long way to the 1930s. And in 1937, 38, you have uprisings in the Caribbean, all across the region. And that leads to the movements for independence. Actually, what that meant is that we were trying to get control of our own destinies. So the post-colonial struggles for dignity. There are many West Indian, a Caribbean person who will tell you his boss was a white man from England.
Yes.
Eric Williams would be one to tell you that. He looked at the colonies as a mechanism for continuing employment for the guys who had become older civil servants from the UK. So yes, so there was an aspect of trying to achieve dignity. And then there was an aspect of trying to achieve equity in the society and development, where we wouldn't have to be mendicants going with an open palm asking for assistance. And all of this happened during that period. The first 10 years of Jamaican independence, 62 to 72, growth rates were in excess of 6-7%. That's massive. But the major objective of reducing the level of unemployment was not achieved. Mm-hmm. So even though you had those massive growth rates, what was a salvation for Jamaica and the Caribbean in general was migration. So we went to England. We ran the public transport. We were the nurses, etc., etc. The Windrush generation, now subject to all kinds of inequity at this moment. Those were some of the things that led me to that title. I haven't mentioned my collaborator, Cecilia Karsh-Brathwaite, developmental sociologist who is an American, deceased now, rest her soul. But she is one who almost cajoled me to put these columns together for a book, because my notion was that this stuff is in the public domain, it's already written. And furthermore, I viewed them more as extensions of chats we would have at the Mona Senior Common Room, the pub of the academic staff. So we would talk about things, and there was Carl Stone, who was a professor of political sociology or politics. I don't recall. But he would do polls, then we would discuss them and so on. So I began to think that, some of what I was seeing in the newspapers, hearing on the radio, sometimes it was absolute nonsense. And it sort of made me write some of these columns. And then I had editors who went that way. So this is how it all came together.
Well, 300 pages and about 79 columns later, this is what is in the book. And I'm sure there are other columns which were not published.
Yes, quite a few.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about those. So in general, having taken a quick look at the book and read some of the columns, as I said before, they're both entertaining, full of information, and very interesting. And for anybody who gets a chance to buy this book, they will find out that it is well worth the investment. It speaks about climate, it speaks about environment, it talks about food security, it talks about what we now call the digital economy. It even touches on the newer trends of green economy and brown economy in many of the columns that you have written. And from my perspective, it demonstrates a significant amount of insight for the period 2020, having written about the period 1976 to 2013. So tell us, Prof, what do you think were some of the major socioeconomic activities that prevailed then?
Okay, if you look at the period 1962, the period from independence, bauxite was critically important in the Jamaican economy. So the fact is, when bauxite was quote unquote discovered, the colonial governor basically in the period of the Second War had dispatches to the colonial office saying, look, there is bauxite. This thing can be used for creating manufacture of aluminium. It could be used in the war effort, etc., etc. That didn't pan out. But the point is, bauxite was sold for little or nothing, was given away. It was given away. When in fact, if you look at what has happened in Jamaica, you see red mud lakes. This stuff it's caustic soda, and they're terrible for the environment. It creates problems with people who get asthma. It seeps into the groundwater supply, etc. And we weren't even getting a true price for the output. There's something peculiar there because bauxite was never traded internationally. So even if you want to say that markets are fine and the best way to get value, etc., you couldn't. There was no market. We never knew what the price of bauxite was. So it suited the vertically integrated companies to simply, list whatever they wished, wherever they wished, that would maximize their profits.
So in other words, there was not an equivalent to what we now have as a commodity trading on the oil market, for example.
Definitely not. But there was something rather important. After the 1973 oil crisis and the creation of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, people had a notion that, we could do the same for bauxite. I laughed at those who told me this because it wasn't possible. Bauxite is not oil. And in fact, one of my colleagues, Stephen DeCastro, an operations research specialist, he used to say, well, bauxite is wherever you look for it. Okay, which you couldn't say for oil. But the thing is that another sort of mentor of mine, an extremely talented, deceased, rest his soul, Professor Alfred Francis, he became head of the research section of the International Bauxite Association. And he developed a formula for getting to what might be considered a true price for bauxite. There is the LME, the London Metal Exchange, where on an hourly basis, minute by minute, you could check the price of aluminium ingot. Now, if you have an internationally ruling price for aluminium ingot, you don't even need expert chemists and metallurgists to tell you that go backwards from aluminium ingot to bauxite and you'll find a proper price.
Absolutely.
And at that point, we were able to get a proper price for bauxite. Then, at the time, the government in Jamaica was the People's National Party, run by Michael Manley at the time, yes. Very charismatic leader who, I don't know, a friend of mine once said to me, Prime Minister Manley shouldn't boast about the gains from bauxite. Just be quiet and take the gains. Because if you raise the issue, then Kissinger and the others are going to come against you. Apparently that may have been true. I don't know. But the point is, we did feel we were getting a proper price for our commodities. So that was one thing. Another development was with the change of government in 1972, I think in 1974, the People's National Party introduced this idea that they were democratic socialists. Now, the objectives were fantastic: equality and a more just distribution of the income of the country, and some developmental aspects that would reduce the dependence upon foreign investment. But that received backlash. Remember, we're talking about the period at the height of the Cold War, Cuban Missile Crisis, all these sorts of things. So tremendous difficulties ensued. In the 1980 period of election, there was a lot of violence, apparently on both sides. And what was to me a disturbing element was the development of the so-called garrison constituencies. Now, The beauty of democracy, although it is Churchill, I think, who said that, you know, democracy is a terrible system of government, except for all the others. But the point of it is that its beauty lies in the fact that if there is an elected official, he or she must respond to the opinions and the assessment of his or her electors. When you have a garrison constituency, that is destroyed. It's destroyed. So that the person elected in a garrison constituency really doesn't have to perform for the constituents. The other thing, which is something that Carl Stone first shared with the Jamaican population and the world, he worried that the nature of violence that occurred as a result of the garrison constituency could possibly become something, I forget his words, I don't have them in front, but something of a widespread mechanism for solution of issues, where violence becomes a part of the defining framework. That was a terrible notion when he spoke about it, but we came close to it. If you remember the issue with the incursions into Western Kingston and Dudus and so on, those were problems. Now, these are negatives, but there are a range of very positive things that took place in Jamaica and the Caribbean generally. Very, very positive things in terms of the arts and the cultural elements, the prowess and power of reggae, and so on. There are lots of things to be celebrated, while there are some things which we have to say, no, listen, we have to tackle these things and deal with them. So this was one of the things that that drove me to try to say things, start a conversation, and also try to get younger people to be involved. I remember once having a conversation with some youngsters, friends of my son's. All of them were so despondent. They were concerned about what? Corruption and the fact that we don't seem to be able to get anything right. I said, no, there are many things that we need to celebrate and that we need to expose and to fix. Anyway, I've talked too long.
No, I think that some of the information that you've just shared, while I find it fascinating, I'm sure I will not be the only person, which is why it is very important that people get an understanding and get some knowledge about this book that you have put together based on columns that you've submitted for publication to what is the Jamaica Gleaner. The book is called The Jamaican Economy, the Post-Colonial Struggle for Dignity and Equity. And it is an absolutely fascinating book. Prof, we're going to call you Prof now for the rest of the evening, because I happen to have had the pleasure to speak with one of your students, and whose name I shall not call during the interview, but the accolades were spot on and said that this is enjoyed teaching, enjoyed learning, and they enjoyed attending the class. And if it wasn't for you, and now I'm quoting, them would have never passed econ. But having read some of the columns myself, I also noticed that for example, in one, you pretty much laid out a blueprint. You were giving, I think it was the current head of state at the time, some recommendations for management, for leadership, for good governance. And it was almost a step-by-step, 1, 2, 3 instruction that, if followed, it is fair to say would have had remarkable outcomes. There are also other activities and other prescriptions, let me just use that word, that you have aligned with, that you are you defend very fiercely. And I want you to talk a little bit about that as it relates to your perspectives on the industrialization of the Caribbean economies and more specifically to Jamaica.
Okay. Jamaica embarked upon a revolutionary notion, the Caribbean, a revolutionary notion in the post-colonial period. and prior to the post-colonial period, because Sir William Arthur Lewis, the first West Indian Caribbean person, Commonwealth Caribbean person to be rewarded, quote unquote, with the Nobel Prize in economics for his work on development economics. He was encouraged by Eric Williams, who at the time was in charge of the research arm of the Anglo-American Caribbean Commission. Now, this was a commission established after the Second War to essentially oversee the transition from power of Britain over the backyard or front yard of the American system, whichever you call it. Okay? And Williams was an amazing historian, although in my own view, Professor Elsa Gavaya was a little more amazing. But anyway, Williams asked Arthur Lewis, whom he knew personally, to come to the West Indies and do something, create a program for upliftment of the population. Williams had written about the Negro in the West Indies. He talked about squalor, about hookworm, about folks not having access to toilet facilities on the plantations, a range of things. If you were to read The Negro in the Caribbean, it would hurt your heart. So anyway, Williams got Lewis to come. He spent about 90 days in the region, whereas the other experts that had come, oh, they spent long periods of time and produced nothing. In those 90 days, Williams, Williams asking Lewis to come to the Caribbean, he created and published something called The Industrialization of the British West Indies in 1951. This was revolutionary because colonies do not manufacture anything. The North American colonies had to fight with Britain to manufacture anything. Britain wanted them to concentrate on the products for which they had comparative advantage. You plant rice and cotton, let us do the manufacturing. The Americans said, no, we're not fooled. Okay, we couldn't. We didn't, at that time, we didn't have the power to do what the Americans did. So the notion of industrial activity in a colony was just not done. When the prescription was unveiled in Jamaica, there was not very much support for it. If you look at the Gleaner of that period, you will see the letters and the comments. They were not supportive of industrial activity in Jamaica, apart from sugar production. Yes. Anyway, after a while, people began to realize, you know what, we could do this thing. We could bring in stuff partially finished and finish them locally. At that time, importantly, there was something, I think it was called UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. But underdeveloped countries, I think they were then still called underdeveloped, right? They were allowed under the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the GATT. They were allowed to impose tariffs on imports if and only if it was to protect what was called an infant industry, which had the chance of growing to adulthood if it were allowed to be protected from the already powerful pre-existing producers across the world. And that's what happened. Lewis had said, however, the Caribbean is a small area in terms of population, 4 or 5 million people. And these were essentially poor countries and poor people. So if you wanted to really gain from industrialization, you should manufacture for export. The economist in Lewis said, now if you look at the thing, the cost curve bends like this. You don't want to be producing at the top end of the curve. You want to be producing at the bottom end of the curve where the cost is its lowest. If you only manufacture for production, for sale in the Caribbean, you'll never reach that bottom end of the curve, which is exactly what we did. And we imposed tariffs. So that idea of industrialization by Lewis was meant to reduce unemployment. But he also said something else. You need to have agricultural reform. Furthermore, most people never realized that Lewis was providing something like a doctor. You would provide a prescription, and the steps have to go in line with what is prescribed. So he said, look, first of all, we have to deal with food security. We have to reduce the quantum of labor that is available in the agricultural sector, and we have to increase the labor force in the manufacturing sector. When that happens, we would increase the levels of income. We would improve the intake of foreign exchange by the sale of these industrialized products. This is not what happened. He said the sine qua non, the without which nothing of industrialization is exports. We did not follow that. And therefore, when it did not meet the objectives that Lewis set, some people started to blame him, which is nonsensical. If you have an architect who gives you a set of drawings and instructions to build something, you give the architect the job, and he flushes the plans down the toilet and builds, and it fails, you can't blame the architect. So that is what something which I began to teach my students. You see, to let them know that it's not that we failed, it's that we failed to do what was prescribed.
So following from that, what do you attribute, since the book covers again 1976 to 2013,
Yes.
where there have been changes in regimes,
Yes.
in Jamaica and across the Caribbean, what are the three major factors you attribute the failures of the economies of the Caribbean to? What are the
That's a question that embodies great complexity. But let's see if I can make some sense out of it.
But before you start that, Prof, I just want to say that some of the columns in the book does give some insight as to some of the ingredients, since we're talking about prescription, and some of the things that in fact has contributed over the years of the failure of some of our major economic undertakings. And again, that information is readily available.
Yes. Well, first of all, there are many things, but I like to point out that a great part of our economic failures have very little to do with economics. Yes. But the thing about it, let's take, for instance, technology. The classical economists, after the work of Marx, did not pay very much attention to technology and technological change. It was a complex thing to study. And so we thought of the ingredients for economic development as land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. Let's say those were the four things. Technology was never considered in that scheme. Indeed, It was subsumed, it was taken as given. Yeah? Now, a few things happened with the entry of computers and software, great computational power. Some work was done in the United States that attempted to assign the increase in output to labor and to capital. This work was done in the 50s. I don't need to get into the full detail about it, but two researchers in particular, Abramovitz and Solow, they looked at the output of the United States of America for long periods of time and tried to see what was attributable to increases in use of labor and what was attributable to increases in the use of capital. When they did this, they found that there was what they call a residual. There was some growth in output that neither of these two factors could explain. And that residual, that mystery, had to do with technological change. Well, everybody knows that. I mean, you know that intuitively, that if you develop a better mousetrap, you'll catch more mice. Sorry. You catch more. So the thing is that that is one thing that is powerful. I talk about Lecky several times in those columns because I really have great respect for that man. I mean, I spoke with him once and he said, when he thought that one of his cows would deliver the offspring that would encapsulate the characteristics, that he would sleep in the pen so that calf would not be strangled by the umbilical cord. Now the thing is, Lecky was looking for cattle that would thrive in Jamaican conditions. The cattle that the Spanish brought, they had developed immunity to tick fever, powerful thing, but they were mager. They don't deliver much milk and they don't deliver much meat. So he started this program of interbreeding, etc., and he developed the Jamaica Red, the Jamaica Black, Jamaica Hope, etc. And you know what? I used to rear dogs, breed dogs. I was a member of the Jamaica Kennel Club, and one of the Jamaica Kennel Club folk who was also a veterinarian, he said to me one day, the Jamaica Kennel Club has a better breeding book status than the Jamaica Hope. I was amazed. Now we sent our Jamaica Hope, I think, to Brazil, to Cuba, as we sent Ortenix. I don't know what has happened with those things, but we did not pay sufficient attention to the impact of technological change. And there's something else that I should say about technological change. People refer to technology transfer. That is wrong, in my view. What we should be thinking of is technology transplant. If you transplant a liver, a heart, a kidney, that operation is not successful unless and until it is accepted by the recipient. That may mean that you actually have to defeat the immune system of the recipient. If you talk about the technology transfer, you can bring a combine harvester from the plains of the US, put it in Jamaica. What is it going to do? Jump over the mountains? It can't work. So that the best thing to think about when you're talking about technology is a technology transplant. The last point on this, if you consider the way we have used the new technologies in computing, and by the way, if you ask any current person, modern day person, what is technology, all you hear about is phones, computers, and software. Whereas the first moment when Homo sapiens took a stick and scratched the earth and put in a seed, we had developed farming. And then you talk about domestication of animals. These are technologies. When Genghis Khan developed the crossbow, where he could shoot from on the horse. And when you think about technologies, you find even up to today, a host of them are initially created for military or activities of war. But they are useful for other kinds of activities. Where am I now? I'm lost.
No, we're talking, remember our conversation now is about some of the, what you consider to be critical components that may have
Okay. The next point is this. And this one is to be some people sensitive, but in my view, corruption is one of the cancers, one of the major cancers affecting all countries of the world from achieving the true values of economic development.
Yes.
You know, because if you take, for instance, you run a capitalist economic system in which very often ownership, managing, accounting, etc., these things are spread across different specialities. So you have rules and regulations. You have accounting regulations. You cannot book an expense as a capital investment and those kinds of things. Now, corruption takes place if you have collusion amongst those people. It creates serious problems. I'll mention something else. The World Bank and some of its staff studied the impact of investment in the Caribbean, Commonwealth Caribbean. What they found was that Jamaica's return on investment for considerable periods was much lower than that of Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. Now, they were puzzling over this. So there are several things you have to consider. First of all, Jamaica has a lot of informal economic activity.
Yes.
Economic activity which is not reflected in the numbers that you get from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, which is an excellent institution that generates and delivers good numbers for us to use to understand what's going on to plan.
I want to segue a little bit now that before on that, because in one of the columns you have a very, very graphic and colorful description of a visit to Coronation Market.
Okay.
Coronation Market
Yes.
is probably the premier free market place in Jamaica.
Yes.
And one of your columns give a very vivid and detailed description. And as you talk about the informal economy, tell us a little bit about what made you write about that particular activity?
Coronation Market?
Coronation Market experience.
Yeah, well, actually, I used to go to Coronation Market every
and Prof, how does that sort of trade and commerce activity, how is that replicated in a more sophisticated space in the Caribbean and in the Jamaican economy?
Okay, I'll answer that in two parts. Let's hope I can. Yeah. I used to go to Coronation Market like once every 2 Saturdays or something like that. I enjoyed it. It was a fantastic experience. And there you see what I consider to be the true spirit of commerce in Jamaica. Now, you may not know this, but women are critically important, both as the higglers, as the people who sometimes go to the farm and actually reap the crop. And then they go there on a Wednesday, reap the crop, Wednesday, Thursday, then it comes down to Coronation Market on a truck. Sometimes they would be on the truck, they're sleeping most of that would have changed now because transportation is much better. So they were a mechanism for, today we use sophisticated terms. We talk about supply chains. We talk about just in time, etc.
Inventory management.
No, these guys were using their supply chains
Blockchain.
and they're just in time.
Yes.
And it's really something. I think in that column, I myself was sort of shocked because one morning I went there and there was this guy with one of these wire clothes hangers and little packets of ganja, and he was walking around selling it, and he was saying high grade, high HIGH grade, which he pronounces as high grade. And there was the policeman right there. So yes, and the other thing was, I think what somebody saying was said $10 you get knife, and I said to myself, suppose an Englishman or an American came here and he said $10 you get knife, he might think that this guy is saying you give me $10 or I'm going to knife you, whereas the guy was saying I'm selling a knife for $10.
Yes.
I just found it funny and talked about it. Then I think there are a couple images with associated with that column. Because I was saying Wray and Nephew is not really the spirit of Jamaica. The spirit of Jamaica is what you get
At
Coronation Market.
Yes.
And then I don't know if I mentioned the fact that in my view, the activities of the Higglers during the complex period of political turmoil and ideological battles in the 70s and 80s, they were central to the functioning of the Jamaican economy. When they went out as Higglers and brought stuff in and so on.
Yes.
You might consider some of this stuff corruption in the sense that some of the established merchants would contract with Higglers to bring in produce for them. Not produce, products,
yes.
Shoes, whatever. Now that's a form of corruption in the sense that they are beating the system. But all of those things worked to maintain some kind of stability in that period. There was something else you asked that I thought I would look at. Don't remember it.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to ask you about is in another column, you highlighted technology, and we spoke a little bit more about it. But the reference that I just want us to bring to the discussion as it relates to your book is how that technology or the lack thereof of innovation in terms of the development of the infrastructure of the country outside of the economic space.
Yes. Okay.
And in the book, you have a very graphic picture of a stall, soupy.
Yes.
All kinds of things that did not say soup.
Soupy's cook shop or something. I don't remember.
Yes.
Yes. What one needs to look at. I'm going to use something from the father of conservatism, Edmund Burke. I'm not a conservative, but Edmund Burke said, you know, when you think of a society, you're talking about a contract. And he used the term between, it should be among, because between is two, among is more than two. Between the dead, the living, and the yet unborn.
Mm.
That is what society is all about. It's a truism.
Profound.
You think about the African griot, you think about the elders, you think about erstwhile, you know, the families that would have more than one generation in it. And he said, you know what? This contract is not a simple contract like for sugar or for the sale of calico or cotton. This is something which lasts forever. And he was really quarreling with the guys who were engaged in the French Revolution. His thing was, listen, you can destroy anything in 3 minutes. You can build hardly anything. You can build nothing in 3 minutes. So that you have to have those elements within your society that has regard for truth, facts, value, justifiable, not justifiable, quantifiable impact, those kinds of things. You need an education system. You need a healthcare system. The so-called social services. I always wonder about this. When you look at the budget, social services, if you have a sick workforce, you can't have any economic services. It's nonsensical. And then when you look at the neoliberal Washington consensus that essentially controlled Jamaica for so many years, the International Monetary Fund, we were constrained. And you know, one of the things that I raise, and people are upset with me for doing that, in my view, we do not wish to go to the IMF. If we know we don't want to go to them, let us manage our operations such that we don't need to go to them. Don't waste the money. And sometimes we do. You know, someone said to me once, as a young lecturer, he was somebody who was involved in the government. And I was saying, why is it that they have to try to fix this gully and they, you know, it's like they do it 3 times? He said, you don't understand this. This is not economics, this is politics.
Yes.
The first time it's done is just during the election year to give people some money. You know, it's not going to last, but you have to do it. It's so perhaps by the 3rd time it's redone, it will be fixed properly.
Of all the columns that you have written, and of all the research and investigation that you've done for the columns that has resulted in this fantastic collection, which is the one that you think you've identified as your most challenging in terms of putting it together?
I can tell you that the most challenging one that I put together as a challenge to put it together was the one that I did on maternity leave, and that was the one that really started me off in doing a regular column. That was done for the Jamaica Observer. What happened is that there was a debate in the press, on the radio, on the talk shows. It went on for weeks about whether Jamaica should increase maternity leave and have it reach a larger proportion of the population. There was on the one side those saying it's a waste of money, and all you're doing is encouraging
Exactly.
moral behavior and all sorts of things. When I listened to this, I said, am I really hearing people speaking sense? It was nonsensical, because anybody who knows anything about child rearing knows that immediate period of bonding between mother and child is so critically important. But challenging, yes, because I had to, this is before the internet takes off. You were able to use some email, but you had to literally go to the library, go to the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, get some paper documents. Yes? So I had to do all sorts of, things, making assumptions, like what is the childbearing age? What's the number of people? How many people would take advantage of this, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the one that was most challenging for me to create. Now, if I were to do that today, it would be easy to do that rather quickly. But generally, I tended to base the columns that I wrote on issues occupying the time space of the society, as you would see from columns in the newspapers. Opinions, talk shows had become very critical. So, for instance, polling was something which was of great importance. And my good friend Stone, he became subject to threats and that kind of thing. But he and I used to speak about it, and I wrote some bits on polling, but I would never disclose anything that he and I shared.
Had shared in confidence. If you're just joining us, we're listening to Prof, affectionately called Prof. This is Wilburn Prasad, and we're talking about this wonderful book that he has. It's called Jamaica Posts The Jamaican Economy, Post-Colonial Struggle for Dignity, Equity, and Development. It's a book that you must have. It's an ebook, and it's an easy, entertaining, and very informative read. Prof, tell us a little bit now about some of the fun times. What's your favorite column in the book? Which is the one that you enjoyed the most writing, that you had the most positive responses to, that has put the biggest smile on your face?
Well, you know, the columns that put the biggest smile on my face is not necessarily because they were great columns, but because of the response that I got from them. And they really had to do with the review of the financial services meltdown in Jamaica. One of my friends, a friend who's a lawyer, he said to me, I don't read the columns because you know, they're not dealing with the reality of Jamaica giving away its assets to I guess he was talking about Trinidadians and Barbadians. So it's those responses where you could see someone, and this was a friend, not actually looking at the evidence that I am putting forward. The financial services meltdown in Jamaica did not have to happen. It happened because of, in part, lax regulation. We did not have the regulatory framework to sort out those problems. And secondly, because of, I can only say, questionable activities by those who were supposed to have fiduciary responsibility. And this is a truth, but people often do not wish to hear the truth. So in that in that series of columns, which is a look back at the financial meltdown, I was pointing out that if you take, say, Cash Plus, or you take the entities that failed, yes, what you will see is that
Citizens Bank,
they did some questionable accounting.
Yes.
So you have properties as investments. These properties are on your books. They haven't been sold. So in a period of inflation, the value of those properties goes up. You simply change what you have them valued at in your books. Oh, and you're an amazing company. Then you go to the United Kingdom and you get hardworking Jamaicans to say, boy, you know, I want to invest in Jamaica. I won't come home, you know, at some point. So give them the money. And you cause them to invest in commercial paper, which is not the same thing as a savings account, and so on. So when the decision was taken, and I was a part of some of that discussion, that you had to rescue the depositors, the insured, and the pensioners. You had to. If Jamaica did not do that, I don't know if it were possible, would have been possible to survive the mayhem that would have been created.
So that the period that you're referring to is what is popularly called FinSact. We are FinSact.
Yes. And you know, I heard this notion, no good deed goes unpunished. And then you had this FinSac inquiry.
Yes.
Now imagine that. You're going to have an inquiry into FinSac. FinSac was like the firefighter that came with the whirring horns to sort out the problem.
Yes.
Now you're going to investigate that. You're not going to investigate the behaviors that led to the fire. It was madness. And we have not as yet, as far as I am aware, received the report from that commission of inquiry. Maybe it's there, I don't know. But
you have identified so many things in our conversation. And I mentioned that you had tremendous insight, because now as you are a resident in the United States, and under the present circumstances, there are so many things that we can identify parallels, as referenced in your book and on your column, as in your everyday lives. So how would you describe yourself? Do you describe yourself as a political pundit? Are you a liberal? Are you a conservative? Are you left? Are you right? Are you a social democrat? A Democrat? How do you describe yourself? And as such, what lens do you use when you were writing these columns, and what lens do you use now to assess the situation in the Caribbean and in Jamaica?
Well, I believe in the morality that leads you to maybe the biblical thing, as you know, treat thy neighbor as you want to be treated. So that I am not a conservative, but I believe that some aspects of societal arrangements must be conserved. That's number one. But I do believe that society is a joint, is a collaborative enterprise. And human beings have to be valued for what they do and what they can do. I also believe that, and you can see this, democracy is fundamental to good governance. There are many countries claiming to be democracies that do not behave like democracies. So I don't know. I would be a quote unquote Democrat, not that I'm a member of the Democratic Party, but I believe in democracy.
Yes.
Several of my opinions are liberal.
Yes.
I think that despotism is dangerous, and I find ignorance is also a terrible thing, and of course the denial of scientific reality. You know, you can do this in politics and in social affairs. You can't do this in physics. You can't deny that you can create an atom bomb. It's done. You can't deny that nuclear war will destroy the whole planet.
Yes.
So I think what one needs to look at is the set of realities that we face. Take this coronavirus of today. When you look at the responses to it of the different countries, Germany and South Korea, pretty good responses. And when you look at the USA, you notice that their quote unquote ramp up for this was, I don't know, I mean, the ball was dropped at some point, and that's what creates the difficulties. The other thing, of course, which has become very clear, you know, a crisis exposes some of the weaknesses in any system.
Yes.
And you notice the disproportionate impact on people of color, as it's termed here. But these basically are the formerly enslaved Africans. There are some serious problems with those things that have to be dealt with. You know?
Systemic. It's been.
So I actually don't like to be labeled, but I don't know. What, my having said that, where would you place me?
Oh, I'm not the star of the show today. Prof, it's you. to get an opportunity just to share your thoughts and to see how you are able to put things in perspective by getting a chance to read the book that you have put together. The Jamaican economy, the post-colonial struggle for dignity, equity, and development. And even though it covers the period, I think 1976 to 2013, the context and content is so relevant today in our current COVID environment.
Yeah.
And I suspect will be very relevant for a very, very long time. I'm going to ask you to tell our viewers and our listeners how they can access this book, because it is, and when I'm going to go and say, having read it, that it is an absolute treasure for any student who is interested in economics, planning to study economics, or has any idea of any inclination or anything that they want to learn about the Caribbean, which is truthful, factual, and credible. They should read this book.
Okay, thank you. Right now, at this moment, the idea that I had was to develop an ebook which would be available on a website which I had created. It's wilbernpersaud.com. Repeat, wilbernpersaud.com, WILBERNEPERSAUD.com. You get there, you'll see how to purchase the book.
Yes. Correct.
Also on the website, because there are other things that I'm going to do, but I have a little section there called Goodreads, where I choose books that I review, and I think they're very useful for folks to read. And as time goes, I'm going to expand the section which looks at U.S. political economy and international relations, because we're in a moment of tremendous change in the world system. The rise of China.
Yes.
The hegemonic position of the United States of America is under threat by China. And you can see this in tensions of all sorts. So the Belt and Road Initiative, the Chinese influx into Africa, the Caribbean, South America, and so on. These are all going to be issues that have to be dealt with. Trade wars between the USA and China. The supply chains, which are of critical importance, as we see in this COVID moment. But as I said, wilbernpersaud.com. You go there, you can get the book as an ebook. You can get it regardless of which platform you use, whether you use an iPhone, an iPad, what's the Google one, the Google phone?
Google Chrome?
No, not Google Chrome. Android.
Android.
You can use it on your Android, on your iPhone, on your iPad, on your PC, etc. It's available.
Thank you so much, Dr. Persaud. It's been absolutely fascinating. There's so much more that we could talk about. Time does not permit. My last question is, when is your next book coming out?
Well, actually, I am working on something right now, which I started many, many, many years ago. I used to teach a course called Caribbean Economic Problems, which was initially created, I think, by groups of folk in what was then called the New World Group. I think George Beckford was critically important in creating that course. And I thought I would put together a book on that. I'm sort of like maybe halfway through it. I don't know how best to do it, whether to do it in installments, put it on the web, but I'm working on it. So it's basically going to be looking at what really underdevelopment is. Is it that these countries are quote unquote developing, or could it be that they're being underdeveloped further? And what is it that we need to do? Are international responses useful? And if so, how best to do them? Dog eat dog, survival of the fittest, or we are one humanity. Homo sapiens, we are unique. The human condition is unique. And we need to grasp that and to see how best we can so fashion the development of our little human into a person with the best kind of worldview. There's not one, but you want it to be one that has value. The last thing I'd like to say is that young lady from Sweden, Greta.
Yes.
She's amazing. and she's truthful, and she's concerned, and she needs to be, because we cannot just devour the planet and leave it to our youth. It's not right. It's not fair.
Well, on that note, I am absolutely sure that we're going to be looking forward to another conversation. We have been left smarter, wiser, and certainly, I think, a lot more optimistic. It's not all gloom and gloom and doom. And based on your perspective and what you have shared with us so far, we are better for having learned about what you have said and having met you. So the only way is up.
Okay, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Again, ladies and gentlemen, author of a fantastic book, not only for education, to satisfy your intellectual palate, but just plain good information. The Jamaican Economy, the Post-Colonial Struggle for Dignity, Equity, and Development. Very, very relevant. And we thank Dr. Prasad for sharing those thoughts and putting those perspectives on paper, in the internet, and in a space where we will all have access to it. Thank you.
Thanks again. You're very welcome.
Small.
Okay, I'm not hearing anything, like as if you fall asleep.
Oh. Oh, I'm in deep trouble.
What happened?
I had a radio interview.
Oh dear. But what's going on with Winston, man?
I had a radio interview.
You were scheduled to do a radio interview? Oh dear. But how that happened?
Because I would have been done with it. No, it's all right. It's nothing. Where I will.
Where is Winston? What's going on, man?
Oh, Winston is probably eating his Sunday dinner, boy.
No, I'm here. What happened? I forgot I was muted. So I'm here. I was here all the time.
Hmm.
So
what did you think, brother?
Well, it was very informative. And I'm going to watch it. I'm going to look at it and then critique it.
Hmm.
And get you a copy so you can look at it.
Yeah.
And figure how you're going to do the editing of it. My observation for some of the parts is, I mean, the answers you gave were very elaborate.
Yeah.
And touch on some additional information that, which can be good, it can be bad sometimes. Depends on to keep in people's interests. So you have to look at it and then you can figure out what to remove. And if we need to do another a little part over, then that also can be done.
Yes.
So as the first piece, I think we have achieved quite a bit.
Yeah. Anne-Marie was mistitling the book. It's not the Jamaican Economy. It's Jamaica, Post-Colonial Struggles for Dignity, Equity and Development, not Jamaican Economy. But anyway, I guess it doesn't matter.
It can be edited, and if there's a need to do over that little piece, that can be do over.
Mm-hmm.
We have that flexibility to.
I can edit that.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
I would say it can be edited.
Yes. I know. I thought Anne-Marie was saying something.
No, I'm saying. Oh, I wrote it wrong because I wrote Jamaican. It's supposed to be Jamaica.
Mm. But I guess that doesn't matter. I don't know.
No, it matters.
Matters?
Yes, you need to get the title of the book right.
Okay.
We need to.
Yes, you said the Jamaican Economy, where it should be just Jamaica, Post-Colonial Struggles for Dignity, Equity and Development.
Yes, I'm saying I said it wrong, so I need to edit it out so that I get the
Yeah,
correct.
okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so I think the best thing to do with that is to go through the whole thing,
Yes,
see what little pieces we need to edit.
yes.
To edit it means you got to reshoot that little part, which doesn't take a long time to do.
But that means you'll have to, I'll have to have on the same clothes and everything
Well,
to reshoot.
maybe make sure you only have one black shirt and
Yeah,
you don't get your haircut any longer or any shorter.
yeah. Mm.
Um,
So when will you have that for me? Because what I can do when you have it for me, I will go through and I could just make a note of the time in the recording and the piece to be edited.
I should have that in very short time.
All right. So what you're gonna send it to me to my Gmail?
I'll send you a link.
Okay.
By the way, let me just see what it says.
Yeah.
Call coming in. Hello? I'm doing fine, thank you. As safe as I can be.
Yes, Anne Marie. So what's going on now?
Nothing much. I'm trying to find these people, so I'll.
Okay, the people that you were supposed to chat with.
Yes, I'm doing it.
Yes.
I'm a brother named Robert, you know.
I guess.
But I know it's not. I know it's not his mom. Okay. But can you pause a minute? Can you pause a minute? Because I was just in a conference right now. One second.
Listen, man, we all go have to go.
All right, guys. I'm gonna take this call.
Yes, and I need to go and get my Lysol and all and this Tide and everything to make my cocktail. Okay,
Yes.
right. So,
I'll post a link for it and then and share it with you. Okay.
all right.
Okay, good. Thanks. I will look for it.
We should
Okay. So
speak. Take care of yourself.
I will.
Yes,
Okay.
man.
Bye
All
bye.
right. Thanks, Anne Marie.
Bye, Prof. Be
You
well.
take care of yourself.
I will. You too. Best to
All
your
right. Thanks.
family.
Bye bye.
Okay. I'm back. Oh, I'm there.
All right. So should